You see, it's not a document that's very easy to read. 600 pages. This is the treaty, which is being debated at the moment. A treaty that we've worked on for over 18 months. And if I show it to you, these 600 pages, it's to explain to you one initial thing. Brexit, ladies and gentlemen, is a lose-lose situation. Brexit has no added value. Nobody, up until now, has been able to demonstrate to me, to prove to me, the added value of Brexit. Nobody. Not even Mr. Farage, who I've met a number of times. And yesterday I was in the European Parliament, not far from him. And Mr. Farage asked to meet with me one day. And my door is open. I'm happy to meet with anybody, to listen, to discuss, even if we are negotiating only with the Theresa May government. But I did receive Mr. Farage, and he said he wanted to explain to me the reason for Brexit. And I listened carefully to him, and at the end of our meeting, I said to him, "Can I put a question to you, Mr. Farage? You fought for Brexit, you won, and we are in the process of implementing the treaty, drawing up the treaty. It's on the table. Soon Brexit will be reality, as you wished for. I'd like to ask you, how do you see things afterwards between the EU and the UK? How do you see the future relationship? What is your vision?" And Mr. Farage responded to me the following, in front of a dozen people who were witness.
Mr. Barnier, after the Brexit, the EU will no longer exist.
So this is the conviction or ambition of Mr. Farage and some others in other countries. And this is also why we need to be very attentive. Ladies and gentlemen, Brexit has no added value. It's a negative negotiation. We regret the decision taken by the majority of UK citizens, and we respect it. For 18 months, therefore, I've been working in this spirit on these negotiations. There isn't, and there never will be, in my attitude, any aggression. There's never been, there isn't, there never will be any spirit of revenge. There's never been, there isn't, there never will be any spirit of wanting to punish. The negotiation has been extraordinary. It consists of a process of withdrawing a country from the EU, so it's not a usual negotiation as in commerce or in other arenas. And my ambition has been to find the right path, both to have an ordered withdrawal for the UK, orderly withdrawal, and we're not there yet, but we have the basis for it, for this orderly withdrawal, and then, as quickly as possible, once the treaty has been ratified, to start a second negotiation, which from my point of view is much more important and much more interesting than the divorce or the separation, which is to construct a second negotiation for the future relationship, which we need to put in place with the UK across all of the areas of future cooperation. Now, we're not there yet, but one of the reasons why, President, I was also very happy, Karl-Heinz, to fulfill your invitation is that this negotiation can't be a secret negotiation. It concerns everybody. It concerns all of you, all of us, each and every one of us, as it interests the citizens of your regions and your cities. And this is why with the support of President Juncker and President Donald Tusk. From the very beginning, we decided, which was not current in these negotiations, to be transparent. All of our negotiation documents were published by the Commission immediately, and we've also worked with the European Parliament, which will have the final word on the Union side, with member states, with the 27 member states on behalf of whom I'm negotiating, in full transparency and in full dialogue, which expresses the confidence and unity on the part of the Union. So where are we at today? The House of Commons, again, has rejected the withdrawal agreement for a second time, and the vote extends and makes worse the uncertainty we're facing, which was created nearly 3 years ago now by Brexit. I can speak frankly on that. And I said just now that I spoke of a divorce, but it's a separation. Any divorce, any separation brings about uncertainty between those separating. And what I can say to you is that the subject of uncertainty, of concern, the consequences brought about by Brexit are innumerable on the social arena, on the human arena, economically and financially, in technical terms and in legal terms. It's also the very first sentence that I expressed at the beginning of my mission to the press. The consequences are innumerable, and they have largely been underestimated when the referendum was taken, and even afterwards in the UK. But once the negotiations kicked off, as Theresa May wanted to in her letter of March 2017, for 2 years, it's she who chose the date of the exit, the 29th of March 2019, 2 years after she submitted the letter. So once the commitment was entered into, we were obliged to study, to put on the table all of these consequences, all of these issues of uncertainty. That's what we did. And this is why this treaty is so important. In its 600 pages, we present, as far as we can, legal responses. We put legal responses and certainty where Brexit created a lot of uncertainty. This is what the treaty is for, no more, no less. But for many, it's a treaty which counts. And in particular, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to bring up a few issues of uncertainty which we tried to deal with in this document. Our priority has been, and will remain, that of these citizens which are affected directly by Brexit. 3.5 million of citizens which are European citizens who live and work in the UK, including 100,000 Romanian citizens, and on the other hand, 1.5 UK citizens who live and work in one of our member states. In this treaty, with the UK, we have brought about a guarantee to secure the rights of these 4.5 million people, the rights which they acquired through to the end of 2020, for themselves, for their families, and for the duration of their life. This is what is contained in this treaty. We found a guarantee with the UK for all of those benefiting from the European budget, and you are all part of this in one way or another. We have, as you know, a European budget constructed over 7 years, and constructed every 7 years, 2014 to 2020, and the UK is a net contributor. They pay around 12 to 14% of everything. So what has been put in the treaty with the UK is that all of the commitments taken with the 28 member states at the beginning of the period in 2014 will be assumed and paid and respected until the end of the period. For the structural funds, for cohesion, for the common agricultural policy, and for all of the other programs, the UK has accepted to pay their part as they decided and committed to at the beginning of the period. There's hundreds of other subjects. Perhaps I could mention one which also concerns your regions and which has interested me less more recently because I had the honour of being Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries for France for a number of years. And that is geographical indications. There are 3,000 agricultural or agroalimentary products, wines, cheeses, olive oils, and a number of other high-quality products, which are protected across the 28 member states for all commercial negotiations which we undertake with third countries. The UK is leaving the European Union. They want and are going to negotiate freely other trade agreements. Having left our common agricultural policy, they'll be negotiating with the US, with other countries. And we know, ladies and gentlemen, that in some of these third countries, they manufacture parmesan, they manufacture feta or Scottish whiskey. We're aware of that. And so, in future negotiations, trade negotiations, which the UK will undertake with third countries, or that we will undertake on behalf of the 27 member states with third countries, we will continue, the UK and us, to protect all geographical indications which are being guaranteed.
So that's the answer that we gave in this text. And then we decided that with the United Kingdom, we would have a transition period. The day after they leave the European institutions, the Committee of the Regions, the European Parliament, Court of Auditors, the Economic and Social Committee, of course the Commission too. It's their choice to leave all these institutions. And we found an agreement that they would stay for 21 months, possibly a little more, 3 or 4 years at most, in the single market and in the customs union, so that the UK companies would have a little more time to get ready, and we too, so that the UK administration could prepare and have time for that and to build. I wonder when I hear about Brussels bureaucracy. Of course it does exist. In fact, President, we're trying to find bureaucracy outside Brussels. You do find some bureaucracy in Brussels, of course. You have to explain that some of that administration in Brussels is for 28 member states. This is the people who negotiate trades. When the UK leaves the Union, they will have to rebuild their own administration in all these fields where it was Brussels, where it still is Brussels. It's doing the work for the 28. The consequences are countless. The British are leaving, as they leave the EU, mechanically, legally, about 700 international treaties, which we signed on behalf of the 28 with partners, trade, fisheries, aviation, all agencies. This all have to be rebuilt alongside the others, maybe on another basis, and we responded, President, to the concerns expressed by the regions, which I heard. In this treaty, we indicate possibility of conserving cooperation with cities, regions, British universities, obviously between Ireland and the United Kingdom with Northern Ireland, and we're even increasing the BIS programs. I'm saying this in the presence of Albert Bohr, who is somewhere in the room. I'm happy to say hello to, with whom I've worked a lot when I was the honor of Commissioner for Internal Market. So we will continue with these cooperations with the regions and cities of the United Kingdom. And I might say something about Ireland at this stage. Michael Murphy is here, after all, with other elected representatives in Ireland. Just a few words on this subject, because there does seem to be an impasse at the moment in the Commons, and some of the British members don't want to vote for this agreement, which Theresa May negotiated. Ireland, that's not a theoretical question. It's not a dogmatic matter. We are sometimes told to be more flexible. In Ireland, it's about peace. It's about stability on that island. That island and all the players there in Ireland and Northern Ireland make a huge effort to rebuild this peace and have done for the 20 years. We've accompanied them, alongside them, so that the Good Friday Agreement, you cannot, in Northern Ireland and Ireland, to rebuild a border. That's not on. I haven't forgotten my visits to Northern Ireland when I was Commissioner, and even more recently too. A few months ago, I went to a small town south of Londonderry, and I met on a private basis a score of women who work with European funds, in particular the Social Fund, for cooperation, for training, and I've not forgotten. A number of those women wept during our talk, and they said, please, do not allow this to start up again. Ireland is men and women working for peace, and we have the duty to preserve the conditions of such peace. And one of the conditions is not to rebuild a border. And then there's another problem, which concerns you all. Ireland, of course. Republic of Ireland. Part of the island is leaving the European Union. The United Kingdom part, which is in fact Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is leaving the single market, leaving the customs union, and the new border of the single market is right across that island, the island. And we, ladies and gentlemen, have the duty of protecting the single market and to checking all the products that come into the single market. Checking them from 3 points of view: security of the consumers, food safety, combating animal disease, and this applies to all the borders, whichever they are. In northern Poland, in Finland, in Portugal, in Greece, at all the outer borders, at the external frontiers of the European Union, products are checked to protect the consumers of the European Union. We check the product from a tax point of view, and it's our duty when it comes to VAT and the budget. All the products are checked to protect the industry against counterfeit risks, and 250,000 jobs threatened by counterfeit, and to make sure that products coming in are in line with the standards that we apply to all our producers. And in Ireland, when you talk about the integrity of the single market, it's not a dogmatic ideology. It's a practical matter. We need to check to protect the European consumers in all your regions, protect the budgets, protect the industry. all products, any live animal entering Northern Ireland from United Kingdom is also going to Poland, Belgium, Spain, or Slovenia. If there's no border where they can be checked, these goods have to be checked. And so, whilst we respect the institutional order, well, for that we have found one solution with Theresa May. We said, let's try to find an agreement to avoid a border in the context of our future relations. We'll find a specific agreement for Ireland to avoid this border by using every means, technological, cyber controls. We'll find a solution quickly, straight away, and we've not made it yet. And as long as we haven't got such a lasting agreement, the treaty provides that the United Kingdom will part and parcel of the customs rules in the European Union. And so I accepted in the negotiations because it's proposed by the United Kingdom negotiators. And there are some in the UK refusing it, saying Europe is trying to force us to stay in the customs union forever. That is being said in the Commons debates, House of Commons debate. That's not our intention. We don't want to use this backstop as such an aim. We don't want it longer than any solution that we might find otherwise. So I'm sorry for dwelling rather lengthily on this question, but I thought it was useful for me to explain to you at what stage we have arrived on this treaty. After the vote a few days ago against the treaty for a second time, and yesterday's vote rejecting a no-deal exit. There will be votes tonight in the Commons. I, ladies and gentlemen, will continue to exercise patience and calm and to remain respectful of the United Kingdom, of its people, and of its legislative and parliamentary procedures. We will be expecting and awaiting that vote in this spirit I've described. And we would say that if the UK still wants to leave the European Union and wishes to leave it in an orderly fashion, which is what the Prime Minister said, then this treaty, as it is, which organizes an orderly separation, this treaty is the only one available. And we need it. What we need to move ahead is not a negative vote against the no deal. We need a constructive and positive vote. This is not the end of the matter. It organizes the orderly separation, which is much better than a hard Brexit or a no-deal Brexit or a disorderly separation. If we want a transition period of 2 or 3, 4 years, which I mentioned earlier, when legally we might not have this treaty ratified. But then there's another aspect, ladies and gentlemen, which is much more significant and more interesting than separation. It's a second negotiation which hasn't started yet, which will start once this treaty is ratified, so as to reorganize a new relationship with the United Kingdom. And the United Kingdom is a great country, very great country. I have great admiration for the people, the culture, the country. Great men of state such as Winston Churchill. This country will remain a friend, a partner, an ally, friend, partner, ally. So we need to organize this partnership on a different basis than membership. since they want to leave. We want to strengthen the friendship. We need to organize an alliance for security in Europe, in addition to what we're already doing together, and which will continue within NATO, in addition to what we do between countries bilaterally. There's NATO. It's still carrying on. And we need to continue solidarity when it comes to defense between the European Union and the United Kingdom, and for internal security, combating terrorism, where cooperation and foreign policy is concerned. So that is what is at stake. That's the most important. And President, you asked me to say something about Brexit. This is where we find ourselves now. And I have to say, bearing in mind the point we've reached, that there is uncertainty, and though we are lucid and responsible, we also need to prepare for what is called a no deal. Because date chosen by Theresa May to leave, which is on the 29th of March, is around the corner. I know the mention of extension, which might be requested by the UK, and that's what's going to be put to the vote in the House of Commons tonight, so I shan't say anything about that. That is not my responsibility. It's for the leaders, the heads of state and government, who will be meeting next week. They will decide. However, let me say that within my remit of negotiator, the situation is serious. We need to prepare also for that option, which we are not wanting, which we've never worked on, because I've been working for a deal, for an agreement, and that would be no deal exit, which would have its consequences. We have been preparing on the European Union side, member states, the Commission. And as I said to Parliament yesterday, we mustn't underestimate the consequences for certain regions, those closer to the United Kingdom in sectors such as fisheries. Of course, the European Union, when it comes to its regions and its economic sectors, will, of course, support as much solidarity as possible, financially speaking. And then I might just say a few words on what is indicated here. Madam, the consequences of Brexit, I have dwelt on that. We're trying to manage that within this treaty. And then the lessons to be learned from Brexit. Why 52% of the British citizens voted to leave Europe. There are, of course, strictly British reasons for that. We respect, though we not share the idea that a country may feel better alone, on its own, rather than with others. It might be better solitary than burden sharing. I'm not sure about that, but I can understand that this is a feeling that may pervade people's minds, like global Britain. There may be other reasons which need to be understood and maybe discussed, because they concern not only some regions in Britain, but many of the regions you represent. There are many regions who, after the financial crisis, which destroyed millions of jobs. There were errors made by the European Union in the last 30 years. I'm saying that because I think so. The deregulation to an extreme, something which I have never approved. Patching up some global governance. Well, those mistakes have cost us a lot. I said in 2010 I was Internal Market Commissioner in the financial sector, and at the very crisis which affected Greece more than other countries, with millions of unemployed, and cost a lot of money to national treasuries. And from 2010 we needed to rebuild what was dismantled all the tools, supervisory tools, regulatory tools, to put the financial market into a context of ethics, morals, and rules where there wasn't any. I even felt that some bankers needed to understand, or were believing that they could be held before courts and put into prison. This was a law I got through because those people felt that they could do anything because they actually could. There were mistakes. There were mistakes nationally in certain countries, such as my own, allowed a lot of their industry to leave, and that was the case of the United Kingdom too. Some citizens felt excluded, abandoned. Talking about public transport, poor internet connections, this feeling that Europe was not protecting, was not doing enough for growth and cohesion. Those concerns must be listened to. Those were one of the reasons for Brexit. It still exists in regions. I'm not a super technocrat in Brussels. I've worked throughout my life, and I've told you that I do listen to these concerns that are being expressed. And my recommendation is that the European leaders, as Jean-Claude Juncker is doing in the Commission, as future leaders will need to do, is they need to understand those feelings and may respond with new policies, with changes, with investing, protecting the borders, supporting the major infrastructures, training and education. This is what I wish for. And in an essential field such as climate change, Europe needs to be proactive. And bear in mind, one of the reasons for Brexit, this feeling of being unprotected and left on their own. And there's another lesson, Mr. President, with transparency, confidence, and unity. It's this unity amongst the 27. Well, that didn't come down from heaven. It was built by the prime ministers and the presidents in office that are in the European Council. When I met them all individually in their offices, I had the feeling after Brexit, the beginning of my mission, as it were, this understanding of collective responsibility. Then there was the election of the new United States presidents, who had a new approach to the European Union, and this whole structure of policies. In the news, you hear the crisis in Syria and Libya, destabilized Mediterranean terrorism in many of our cities here in Europe. All that creates a feeling of serious concerns, and this is why they chose one single negotiator for Brexit. And we've cultivated this sense of responsibility through transparency, through dialogue. I've come here to Bucharest several times, 2 or 3 times, as I did to other capitals, to see the leaders, the government, the captains of industry, because Brexit concerns us all, and we've tried to continue this dialogue and this transparency which represents the feelings of the 27th. And finally, the lessons. I've said this a couple of times. We need to think, do we want to be alone or do we want to share in today's world? I think we need to share the burden. Doesn't mean to say we're not patriotic. You can be a Slovene, a Belgian, and proud to be, whilst you're still European on top of that, as well as being a patriot. Not instead, but it is necessary to be a European. If you look at the word, I could put a graph on this screen, which Mr. Cameron published 6 or 7 years ago. It was Mr. Cameron, Prime Minister, you remember him? To show the importance of the single market. There are columns in that graph with countries which are the biggest in the world economy, G8, G20. In the first column, in 2019, there are 4 European countries in the G8. That's 4 only out of 28. Germany, UK, France, and Italy. And the likely pace of economic growth of these countries and the other countries around the world, China, Russia, Brazil, United States, in those countries, nobody is waiting for us anymore. And every 10 years, there are 4 odd countries that are out of that graph. 4, 3, 2, 1. In 2050, in this trend, there will only be Germany, who will be the 7th country in the G8. I use the same numbers. Those of Mr. Cameron updated them to show the result, which means it's 27 countries in our single market basis, 440 million inhabitants, 22 million companies, competitive, regulated economy, a capacity which is arising from the foreign policy and defense policies, together with second, third, fourth. We're still at the table of the G8 with the great of the world who are already there and who will be there for good. Well, I won't go into politics. Or I didn't go into politics to be just a spectator. Just as you are. You're drivers, not an observer. You can be a leader, spearheading. Every company is necessary, every stretch of land is necessary. But in today's world, if we want to be lucid and keep our eyes open as to what is happening in the world, we must be together, European, in addition to being a player in your own region and in your own land. That's the lesson that I think we ought to learn from Brexit. I'm happy to share it with you. Let us remain calm in the days and the hours ahead. We need to respect the United Kingdom and determined to preserve the interests of the European Union and first and foremost of the citizens of the European Union, wherever they live. We are also determined to build as quickly as possible, and I'm rather impatient, after the treaty is signed, to build with the United Kingdom a friend, an ally, a partner, build a solid partnership for the future generations. Thank you very much.